Are you a leader, manager, entrepreneur, business owner, or knowledge worker? Are you leading people or wondering how to be a better leader in your own life and work? If you are, then you can be experimenting better. Welcome to The Experimental Leader, a podcast that takes a look at the ways leaders are experimenting in their own work. Hosted by Melanie Parrish, we dive into real-life conversations about how people might be using a scientist's mindset and experimenting in their work. Shift your leadership into something that works better. Join us on The Experimental Leader today.
Hello, it is so nice to be here with you live today. It's the last podcast before the holidays. And so I just wanted to take a minute to tell you what's going on at my house, because I don't know if your house is crazy. There's this weird confluence of COVID, pandemic, like coming out of COVID. So all of our activities have started. I'm really busy with work. My husband's really busy with work. Our kids are busy. And so we're trying to get ready for Christmas, which never used to be hard. And then during COVID, it really wasn't hard. But it's like we lost our chops or something. So I was traveling at the beginning of December. And then this weekend, I was at a swim meet. And there just really wasn't much time to try and decorate for Christmas. So first, I had my gardener, who is lovely and amazing, and he's done gardening. So he put up my Christmas tree and brought up all my Christmas decorations, and we worked on that. And then he got the boxes to all go away. So that was great. But then there was like getting the lights on the tree. So at the moment, my Christmas tree was decorated by my 16-year-old son. And it looks like it was decorated by, my 16-year-old son, but he's tall. So he put the lights on and they look great. And that may be as much Christmas joy as we have at my house this year. And then my gardener came back and he was able to help me switch out my Christmas dishes. And, there was a whole lot of laughter and trying to figure out what to do with all those fussy little Christmas dishes that my grandmother used to use, which may not fit into my life, but I actually don't know like who's coming over in the holidays. So I can't really plan because somebody might drop by and we might need a little plate for cheese or something. I don't know. Anyway, I am so excited about taking some holidays with my family. And I just want to wish you all, I celebrate Christmas, so I'll say Merry Christmas, but also whatever holiday you celebrate, I hope that it's full of love and laughter with your family. And I've been thinking about leadership and my own leadership, and I had a conversation with a client that was really interesting about the idea of radical acceptance of uncertainty. Radical acceptance of uncertainty. And I'm fascinated by this thought. And I love the radical part because I always feel like that is like amplification of the doing of the phrase, whatever that is. And then I love this acceptance, like that you accept that there is uncertainty. And I think a lot about reactive behaviors and how they get in the way of people's leadership, and that acceptance is so powerful that we can just accept that there's uncertainty, and the not knowing is part of the work that we do as leaders. So I've been really playing with this in my own mind. I think that it's an amazing sentiment. And so I really want to challenge you as you're going into 2022 to ponder the idea of radical acceptance of uncertainty. And my question for you is, what would radical acceptance of uncertainty bring to you, your team, and your organization? Well, I want to move on because I'm super excited about my guest today. Her name is Heather Dominick, and she's the creator of businessmiracles.com. And she trains entrepreneurs and leaders to create more impact and maybe more income with less effort by doing things differently. She also talks, we're going to do some talking about highly sensitive, being a highly sensitive leader and what that might mean. And I am so thrilled to have Heather here today. Welcome to the show, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really so looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, well, I would love to know, just out of the gate, you're a leader, you lead in your own organization. What are you up to in your leadership in your life right now? How are you experimenting?
Well, I think we're all experimenting, right? I really appreciated just listening to you, like talking about getting ready for your holidays, and also, your conversation with your client about the radical acceptance of uncertainty. And I was just thinking, like, yes, that is the focus, right? As we head into 2022, and at the end of 2020, we were constantly hearing in the media about, like, oh, thank gosh, 2020 is over. And now here we are going into 2022, and things, are a little different than when we were leaving 2020, but they aren't what we all expected them to be. So I think there's the absolute need for being willing to be experimental as a leader, which is why I so love the focus of this show and the work that you do.
Well, let's dive into this idea of being a highly sensitive leader or highly sensitive leading. And I would love to know, I know a little bit about this because I have clients who identify in this way, but there might be people who are listening who don't know what this means. So can you tell us how you know if you're a highly sensitive leader, or how you know if someone else is?
Sure, absolutely. So I think first, it's probably really valuable just to talk about the phrase highly sensitive. And first of all, that's not a phrase coined by me, but it's a phrase that comes out of research primarily from the mid 1990s. There's various researchers who have done work around what it means to be a highly sensitive person. One of the most well-known is Dr. Elaine Aron, because she wrote the book, Highly Sensitive Person. And in very short, what it means is that if you are highly sensitive, your nervous system is wired to take in stimulation at a much higher degree than someone who is not highly sensitive. So that can be stimulation, anything from sight to sound to smell to touch to information to energy. And also, what's valuable to highlight is that if you are highly sensitive, this is how you were born into the world. So I always like to say it's not what your parents did to you, and you didn't pick it up on the playground in kindergarten, and it's not because of that weird purple drink that you had in college. It is literally how you were born into the world. The work that I do is I come in to support those people who are highly sensitive, who feel called to either lead through being self-employed or to use their highly sensitive traits to be a leader in their career or in any aspect of their life. So it's a path of empowerment, and it really does require learning how to work with your nervous system in a very specific way.
And how would someone know if they are a highly sensitive person?
So Dr. Elaine Aron designed an assessment, and so you can absolutely find her work easily online. And I have created an assessment working off of Dr. Elaine Aron's assessment for those highly sensitives who feel called to be self-employed.
That's great. And I'm guessing can we put a link to information about that in the show notes?
For sure, please.
Yes, that would be great. Let's do that. And so, people have, they have this, they are this, and then they become leaders. So what do they need to think about as leaders that's different than what everybody thinks about?
So I think most importantly, for those of us who are highly sensitive and who feel called to really be contributing to the world, there's a phase where you have to learn to, I'm going to go back to the phrase actually that your client shared, there has to be a sense of radical acceptance
Yeah.
and a radical acceptance that you process the world differently. Because your nervous system is wired to take in stimulation at a much higher degree, you are going to have a different experience than those who are not highly sensitive. This is probably a valuable place to also mention that the research states that there's 20% of us who are born into the world highly sensitive. So one of the things that I also like to highlight is that the majority of the world is designed for the other 80%. When you're untrained, you can start to feel like, because you process the world differently, that there's something wrong with you. So if you are to step forward into a position of leadership, whether that be within your family or within your local community or in a business or in a career, in any regard, it's really, really so important to first, again, have that radical acceptance that I process things differently, and that does not mean that there is something wrong with me. It actually means that I have a unique contribution to bring to the conversation.
So, I'm just wondering if there's like some things that are common, like what would be some common circumstances that someone who's highly sensitive might be challenged by?
Absolutely. So I've identified in my work what I refer to as the top 12 highly sensitive shadows, and then also the top 12 highly sensitive strengths. So I'll speak to the primary highly sensitive shadow, which absolutely is overwhelm. And what's really important to emphasize about that shadow of overwhelm is that we're not really talking about overwhelm the way that you'll, see it in the media or magazines. We're not talking about the never-ending to-do list. For those of us who are highly sensitive, overwhelm truly is a physiological and physical experience. So it becomes imperative to learn how to work with your nervous system so that you don't go into that space of overstimulation and then therefore that space of overwhelm, which physically can tend to cause things like your mind goes a little bit fuzzy, or you find it hard to be able to access words, or really being able to keep up with a conversation. And when you begin to learn how to work with your nervous system, then you can begin to shift from that shadow of overwhelm into those 12 highly sensitive strengths. And I'll speak to one of the top strengths, which is intuition. So when we're really able to come to a space where we're able to effectively navigate that overwhelm, it gives us access to a deep degree of intuition. And that is a very, very valuable leadership quality when you learn how to really use it. And again, use it in that space of radical acceptance, meaning that if you are accessing your intuition as part of leadership, then most likely you are going to probably be showing up differently as a leader than someone who's not highly sensitive. And you have to be A-okay with that.
I think that's really interesting. And if you were to give people, somebody's listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, this is me. Because I imagine there's people that are like, wow, this is me. I never knew it was me. How do they start? Like, what's the first step for somebody who's thinking, that might be me, that highly sensitive thing sort of resonates. Like, I want to do the assessment. And then any tips you have for them on just, radical acceptance is the one thing?
Yes, well, definitely that first step, right? And it sounds like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty easy, but it's actually, again, back to that word radical, right? Yeah. Because if you just think about 20% versus 80%, it does mean that you are going to go about things differently. And for many of us, we were trained to believe that that is not okay. But that willingness to actually go about things differently actually positions you to be that much more effective as a leader. From there, the next step is really learning how to work with your nervous system proactively. So the untrained, highly sensitive tends to feel as if the world is happening to them. Right. And if they can just keep up with, protecting themselves from even the possibility of overwhelmed, and that's seen as success. For those of us who are called into a greater space of leadership as highly sensitives, we want to go beyond coping, and we want to go into that space of creating, which creativity is one of the other top 12 highly sensitive strengths. In order to be able to do that, you need to learn how to work with and manage your nervous system. So there's various tools, and when we share that assessment, that link to the HSE quiz in the show notes, then you'll be able to receive a free success guide, which will teach you some of those first tangible tools and steps that you can use to learn how to manage your energy. So you don't have to feel like you're constantly needing to react, but you can instead be proactive with and as you enter into potentially overstimulating situations.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That's a great start. And where can people find you, Heather?
You can definitely find me at businessmiracles.com.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you on my show today. Such an interesting topic. Thank you. And it's been great.
Thank you.
So I loved talking with Heather today. It was such an interesting conversation. And what I noticed is that all of the things that Heather is suggesting, this sort of acceptance and all of this, is a part of improving feedback loops. We don't want people to be overwhelmed because we want them to be able to take in information. We want them to be able to share information. So if we look at the experimental leader, sort of that's the principle. It's improving those feedback loops if people aren't reactive and they're able to respond in those ways. I love this idea that radical acceptance of so many things can change the way that we do our work as leaders. And I have a challenge for you. And that is, for the next couple of weeks, I want you to look at where you can use radical acceptance of uncertainty in the way you lead. Go experiment.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Experimental Leader. We hope you have found value in today's episode because we're dedicated to helping you become the experimental leader you want to be. To access the show notes or learn more about working with Melanie, visit melanieparish.com. Go experiment.